In the great words of Dr. Temple Grandin, kids have to be exposed to different things in order to develop. A child's not going to find out he likes to play a musical instrument if you've never exposed him to it. And I commend those parents who are out there in society bringing their children to various events, regardless of how challenging it can be, because they truly love and care for the well-being of their children. And I thank those members of society who are not only encouraging, but empathetic and support our mission to raise great members of society.
I'm an autism awareness angel, making sure my wings protect the different, the stranger than. I'm an autism awareness angel. It's good, cause I'm cool with the unique behavior. I'm an autism awareness angel. Will you accept me? Cause I accept you. I'm an autism awareness angel, cause the view from the spectrum is a better point of view.
Hi, I'm Tally and welcome back to Autism 30, and this is the third of our Parent Talk podcast. Today, once again, we have our fabulous Tina and Kathy in studio with us today, and welcome, ladies, back.
Hi, thanks for having us yet again.
I love speaking with all of you, and I love the fact of the warm response we're getting from our listeners. Excellent. Now, just to jump right in, because I know we seem to run out of time so quickly, so I'll follow through on question number 1. How far do you think society has come in general with autism acceptance?
Well, I'll go first.
Absolutely, Tina.
I think we've come a long, long way. I think there's a lot of information out there about autism awareness and autism acceptance, and something that came across my computer the other day, and just as a way of an example, I know there's a town, and forgive me, I don't know the name, but a town in the States that's marketing itself as an autism-friendly destination.
That's great.
Yeah. I think it's like a beach town, and
water.
hopefully some of the listeners can Google it and figure it out. But, they're saying, come here, come for your vacation. We are autism-friendly, and on the beach you can meet other families with autism and share stories and what's worked and what hasn't. And
I'm going to check it out for
I know,
sure.
Right? So the idea that someone... a whole town is realizing the positivity and marketing it just tells me that there's a lot less stigma than there used to be.
That's great. I haven't heard of that town, and I'm looking forward to looking and Googling that one up myself. And what about you, Kathy?
I just have one little story I'd like to share with you.
Absolutely.
Sort of a personal example. My oldest son, who's typical, was at his winter formal last night, which was a very exciting event. So I was hearing all about it today, well, at least the parts you wanted to share with me.
Yes.
Anyway, he was saying at one point, they were all on the dance floor, and it was towards the end of the evening, and they do have a boy with autism who will be graduating with them this year. And he apparently got up on the stage and started to dance. And when I heard that, honestly, I kind of went, "Oh no! I hope the kids didn't make fun of him or laugh or." Yes. No, everyone cheered him on and clapped, and they all had a great time.
So nice. Yeah.
I know. I thought that was really
That's fantastic.
Heartwarming.
Really heartwarming. Really heartwarming, because I wasn't quite sure where that story was going, and it had a happy ending. So, yeah,
it gives me hope. Like it's a hopeful story for our own kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
What a great story to start our podcast off.
Yeah, thanks for telling us.
Like I know one way that I find we've changed as a society is, I know originally when my child was diagnosed, the movie that I think we've all heard of is Rain Man, and that's pretty much all that I heard of that was out there. And since then we've had wonderful movies about Temple Grandin, and there was Adam that was out about a person with autism, and other movies are being made and characters are being represented on TV shows such as Parenthood. Right. And all of these characters are being represented living in society in general. And they're on Sesame Street now. And I think Hollywood and other media outlets are making a conscientious effort to include people on the spectrum being part of everyday life, which I think is fabulous and long overdue, because I don't know how you find it. I'm past 40 and I know when I was growing up, there wasn't anything mentioned about people with autism when I was growing up.
No. When I look back, I think there might have been a boy in my class in high school that had autism. We just thought, he was a little different, a little
Yes.
socially awkward. Just a little different. But I bet he was on the spectrum. But he was really the only person that I remember growing up with that I would even question now.
But do you realize he has autism now?
No.
Because you're a parent of a person with autism.
So I knew nothing really about autism until I became a parent.
So
Really, I knew the term, but
and look how educated you are now, because imagine the people that you went to school with that don't have any exposure to autism still probably wouldn't be aware of that person having autism way back then. So right now we're living in an educated society, and I don't know if you heard in our previous podcast also, which I think was absolutely brilliant, is that we're 3 mums and all our children go to separate schools here in British Columbia, and all 3 of our schools have demystification programs that they've brought in to educate our students and our children about autism to better educate the populace in general.
right.
You know.
For sure.
So I think that's great. And I think we have a long way to go, however, but we'll leave that for another podcast topic. Now, getting on the more serious side, what do you find most frustrating about your child having autism? Tina, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Well, geez, a few different things come to mind. One, I guess, is sometimes I have like a feeling of helplessness. And so even though I feel like we're getting my daughter every good therapy in the book and every support and, we've done all the readings and everything, sometimes, if she's having a meltdown, I just feel really helpless on how to help her. My daughter's kind of straddles the line between verbal and nonverbal. She can speak, but she doesn't really have access to her words. She can't really get to her words.
Yes.
And so, and just overall, even though you're doing everything that you think is right, you're pretty helpless in terms of where she's going to end up. A lot of that's just going to be, you got to wait and see.
Yes.
And so that is another thing, is just not knowing the future. And it's hard, some of us are a little more type A and I like to plan and I don't know where she's going to end up. And,
Yes.
and, our timelines are different. And so, we try to stay really positive and stuff, but you also have to be practical. And I guess the last frustrating thing can just sometimes be the grind of it. Just so many therapies and appointments, emails back and forth, so many members of the team, IEP meetings, which are their whole other thing. Just getting supports, arguing for supports. It can just be very exhausting. And if you are like me and working a full-time job and have typical children that also want to go to swimming lessons and skating lessons, and it just can feel frustrating that it can be such a challenge, I guess. But I mean, not to be overly negative, but the question was what the frustrations are, and so that's what some of the frustrations are.
Yeah.
No, and I think you bring up really good things where if a typical parent is listening, I mean, this is the reality for many parents of children on the spectrum. I think it's very valid and great information for people to know. And what about you, Kathy?
Well, I kind of, everything you said. Everything you said. But for us as a family, it's so frustrating because my son is nonverbal. So that is our biggest frustration. He can use some signs. He can use some picture symbols. He's got a handful of words. But, he's got a lot more inside him that I'm sure he'd like to share with us.
There's no doubt.
And it's just, it's frustrating. It's downright heartbreaking. But so that's our biggest. And the fact that I've seen him gone from a happy, carefree little boy who to one now who, frustrates very easily and is dealing with anxieties that at times have been absolutely debilitating. And he's not really great at amusing himself. So it's exhausting because I also work, and I also have another child who's not on the spectrum, but he's older than your little one, Tina. So I don't have to take him to swimming lessons, but
You have to take him to his job.
I have to. Yeah, you're right. I do. So if only my little guy could find some ways to happily amuse himself that didn't involve us constantly trying to engage him or, involve him in different activities. Because right now, if he's left alone, he just gets into all kinds of trouble. So you kind of choose to stay with him and engage him and play with him, or you leave him alone for a few minutes so you can get something done, and then you deal with the disaster afterwards.
I'm sure some of the trouble he gets into would be comical in retrospect, but we don't need to go there. Yeah.
Oh, dear.
Like, I know one of the things that I find frustrating is I don't necessarily find it frustrating that my child has autism, but I must admit that my child isn't the type of child that tantrums outwardly. He's more the child that would rather sit down and lie down and put himself in the corner with a book and just read. And he is verbal, however, he is very much guided on his own subject matter.
Yes, I know what you mean.
And will script as well. So, and I find the things that he does fascinating, but the thing that frustrates me is the whole point of the worry about him going outside in the outside world when my husband and I are no longer there. And it's also the whole point of the fact that the constant having to educate other people and the whole point of having to monitor every aspect of his life and monitor every single person that has an interaction with him, where typical parents really don't think about any of that. So my frustration really doesn't lie in the point that my child has autism. My frustration really lies in the outside world about the lack of education that's out there, even though our society has come a long way, as we've clarified in our first question. But it's the whole point of we're dealing in a school system where, I mean, I'm a teacher, and unfortunately, I wasn't given a whole lot of autism education, and we're supposed to have an inclusive classroom. So I know teachers, as hard as you are trying out there, there's still a lot of education that you need to have in the way of that. So I find the grind of, I call it battling people, but it's not really battling. It's a constant
Advocacy.
It's the advocacy that I find draining. So
it is. Yeah, you're right.
and thank you. That's actually the word that I was looking for, Tina, but I couldn't actually find it on the tip of my tongue. So
Yeah, I have a book at home and I haven't read it yet because there's so many books to read, but it's like, I think it's divided into two parts, and it's like, what do parents want teachers to know, and what do teachers want parents to know about kids and autism, with autism in schools? And it's just on my to-do list.
Oh, there's a lot on my to-do list. So another question that I had, does your child know they have autism? And if they do, how did you approach the subject with them? Tina?
Well, we haven't had that formal discussion, just based on the fact that she understands a lot, but she can't really verbalize back to us. And so, I'm worried about, explicitly giving her too much information that she can't then ask questions. But overall, philosophically, I'm completely endorse telling children that they have autism, in a kind way. And what I've heard people say is that adults with autism that I've read online and through stories have said that they knew that there was something different. And when someone finally told them that it was autism and it had a name and what it meant, they felt very free or like there was an understanding there, like, oh, that's why. And so, there's a lot of different beliefs about that. So that said, the word autism is always said in our house. We go to walks and events about autism. And we do wear those little blue pins, not to be too specific. And it was really interesting that one time my husband told me that my daughter pointed at blue and something that was blue and said, blue for me. Oh. So we think that, with all the little blue puzzle pieces in our life, that she had associated that with herself. So we talk to our son a lot. There's a lot of demystification and working through my son's feelings about his sister having autism. Yes. So we don't shy away from the word, and I look forward to my daughter being able to speak more, so I can actually have a really good conversation with her. I'm quite hopeful that eventually we'll get there.
Yes. And what about you, Kathy?
Well, I have to say the same thing. We don't shy away from the word autism. It's, we are always talking about autism.
Yes.
But my son's he's nonverbal. So does he really understand? I don't know. How much is he listening to? I don't know. Does he know he has autism? I'm sure he knows that he's different. Yeah. I'm sure he knows he's different. It's a hard one for me to answer because he can't tell me.
Well, I know my son definitely knows he has autism, although my child is more verbal. I know there was a lot of demystification that was happening in school, and I've never shied away from the term with him because I never wanted it to be a shameful topic for him. I always said it's his superpower. And I know when I was first learning about autism, I learned about all these famous people who had autism, and I would always point to, oh, did you know so-and-so has autism and he did all these fabulous things.
That's great. Yeah.
And such had autism and these are these fabulous things. And I know that there was a talk that somebody gave in his school, and it was quite negative in the way of autism. They thought it was quite positive, but it seemed very heavy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, demystifications can go sideways somewhere. Sometimes I've heard horror stories,
And this one kind of did go sideways, so I thought I didn't want because of the fact that, one thing we all do have in common is we're never really 110% sure of what they truly feel and think about certain issues, and this is one. So my husband and I sat down, and what I did is I created a sheet of paper, and my special needs is I have dyslexia, and I certainly know my son, who's still in elementary school, can spell far better than I, and I'm university educated. So what ended up happening was I ended up writing all the qualities that I know I'm not very good at, and I wrote all the qualities that my husband isn't very good at, but my son is fantastic at. Wow. And so what I did is I cut them all into paper, and I put all these qualities in a fishbowl, and we all had to take one out and decide who is really, really good at this one particular thing. And my son is fabulous at spelling, and I said, well, that's not Mummy. And my husband said, no, that's certainly not me. Excuse me. So he put it in front of himself. And what he realized is that we all had equal papers, because of course I created it, but we all had equal papers, and my husband had a limited amount. I had a limited amount, and so did my son. And what we all said at the end is each of us is good at something that the other isn't good at, and I have challenges in spelling and all these things because I have something called dyslexia, and you're fabulous at this, but you have difficulty with your expressing yourself, and you're a picky eater, and all of these classic things that he has, which run down the autism signs of diagnosis. And he goes, "Oh, okay," and walked away. So, so at least I'm assuming in his head that this is something I have, and so
just accepted it.
It just. I hope he just accepts it as it is. Now, I've heard a lot of other different people explaining autism to their child, but I'm like you, Tina. I'm a strong believer to tell them as early as possible, so that they actually have a label to relieve some of the stress that they might feel. Because I've heard the similar stories that the second people do find out that they have autism, it feels like a relief to them.
And I think, I have a lot of hope as my daughter grows up, that she may find a community in that. So there's lots of stories of young persons, men and women, blogging or meeting together online, meeting together in person, little dating little sites and stuff.
Oh,
so
don't speak about that yet, my little baby
it's
boy.
It's a thing, I swear. So I think there could be some pride and ownership in that down the road, and not having that label might, or that understanding, and might deprive someone of a community that they could find otherwise. And with the stats and the diagnosis going up, there's going to be a ton of these kids, and if they can find each other and be friends and have someone that understands the way that they think, that could be a real gem in their life.
Oh, absolutely.
Although if my daughter were to date someone just like her, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine. Oh my goodness.
You're a better parent than I, because I still can't even imagine my son dating. No,
my son tries to marry my daughter all the time. He thinks that they should get married.
Which is a whole other podcast in itself. Now, here's another question, kind of on similar topics that we've been talking about. What do you wish for would be created at a reasonable price in society, in the marketplace, for your child, and why? Kathy, what would you love?
Okay, I can go while Kathy gets her thoughts together.
Yes.
One would be maybe some more autism-friendly spaces. So places where we can go where it doesn't seem so stressful. Sometimes just going to even the play place at McDonald's, if my daughter's in a foul mood, can just go sideways quite quickly.
Another question I had, what do you wish would be created at a reasonable price in the marketplace for your child, and why? Kathy, how about you start?
Oh, there are so many different types of therapies that are available. And I would just, I think as a parent, you want to do everything you possibly can for your child.
So true.
And, just given the time and the budget, boy, there's so many things out there I would love to try. Who knows, who knows what might be the thing that really helps them along. So, the therapies, everything adds up. They're so expensive. Speech therapy and your OT and, just sort of regular, we do regular behavioral therapy a couple times a week. So there's not a lot in the budget for any of the, other therapies that are available. So that's one thing. And the other thing is food.
Yes.
I wish we could get more organic and free run and non-medicated and non-processed and, healthier foods for a more reasonable price.
Yes.
That's probably a whole other discussion for the podcast too.
Yes. And what about you, Tina?
So I have a couple things. So one thing was maybe some more autism-friendly spaces. So sometimes it can be hard to take my daughter out into places that are not too loud, but are, sensory friendly, and people will understand, and I don't have to worry about, is she going to be encroaching on other children, or, depending on her mood. And I did read online recently that there's some gyms in the States. I know one in New York, and it's literally just like a sensory fun gym just designed for autistic kids and their families to
Yes.
go. And the sign above said something like a place where you don't have to say I'm sorry or something.
Oh,
and
I love this
I know.
answer. This is great.
So
Oh my
good.
gosh.
I know. And then I know it's a whole bunch of people on Facebook were like, oh, I want to start one here. And so, we're lucky in British Columbia, especially locally, we've got the Pacific Autism Center opening up, and there'll be a
Yes.
gym space in there. So we'll see what goes in there. But it doesn't need to be there. I mean, any private business could have one day a month where it's more. I know Cineplex is doing
Yes.
sensory-friendly screenings, which is awesome, and a big shout out to them. But just more things like that where you don't have to worry so much about bringing your ASD kids to something where other kids will be. Something else that I know has been available at some times, and right now I'm having trouble finding it, is like SIB workshops. So,
Yes.
there used to be some, and I know there's some for older kids, but
Before you go on, could you explain to the audience what SIBS is?
yeah, sure. So just the concept of the typical siblings of ASD kids and workshops to help them both connect with their peers and discuss if they want any of their experiences or get any of their questions answered or anything like that. So I know my typical son, who's 5, he's got a lot of questions and he's working through a lot of things. And sometimes the things come out of his mouth that are a little bit, okay,
Yes.
they have to scratch my head and try to figure out where that's coming from. And sometimes, maybe it's just his personality, but he kind of shuts down a little bit and doesn't want to keep telling me more about and I'm trying to not sound like I'm judging him for any frustrations he has with his sisters, but I feel like maybe he's picking up on that. So, if he could talk to someone who's not me, maybe they could get him to open up. And so just having more things like that would be awesome. And then the last thing, and this is very specialized, and if anyone listening has anyone in the psychological or psychiatric community, I think that they need to develop better strategies for anxiety for nonverbal ASD kids. So
Yes.
they, CBT is a kind of sort of talk therapy that deals with anxieties and OCD behaviors, and it's sort of a very good gold standard. But you can't, I've heard a lot of people say you really need to be verbal to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And, I totally get what they're saying, because CBT involves a lot of explaining what your fears or your anxieties are and recognizing that the anxieties will come and how you're going to overcome it and calming down strategies and exposure therapies, etc. But I just absolutely refuse to believe that there's not these strategies you can't use with ASD kids. And so my daughter, who understands everything but can't speak, I feel like we could start to work on things like talking about yucky feelings, and it's okay when the yucky feelings come. And, I just feel like there's got to be people that can work with her. And I know there is some new research coming out that I've seen talking about some early exposure therapies with these nonverbal kids. So there is something out there, but it's so preliminary. And it's like, one group of researchers in one city in the States doing it. And I really wish there'd be more psychologists or psychiatrists or social workers, counselors in the area just willing to take up it, because it's not easy. It's not an easy group of kids to work with. And so it does require expertise. But if I had to ask for one thing that would really make a difference right now, my daughter's anxieties are so high, and someone that could help us with that. And I know, there's pros and cons. Some people talk about different play therapies and stuff. Just anyone who's willing to take a stab at helping her, recognizing that she's mostly nonverbal, that would be a really big help.
That's
Wow.
really
Wow. But
Wow.
you had, I know, I had to say everything you just said. Oh my gosh. Because my son too has the anxieties that are just, say, debilitating.
I think of the Temple Grandin movie and how she didn't want to go through those sliding doors.
Yes.
And I had that exact experience with my daughter when she was younger outside IKEA. And I'm telling you, try to take her into IKEA, you thought you were leading her to the slaughter. She was acting like I was murdering her. And of course we got all the stairs, and I don't care so much about that. But it was just, my heart went out to her because there was so much anxiety about going through these doors.
Yes.
And it was so hard to reach her, and even now, like really loud places and different trips, and sometimes she'll just look at a place and it's just like, no. And she just shuts down and tries to run the other direction. So, yeah, it's a big one.
I know one of the things that I would love to see, and I'm sure this goes with other health issues as well, is that we live in the province of British Columbia. It's a beautiful province, but we're here and all our family does live in a province back east. And unfortunately, we don't have family here. However, services across Canada are so different. We're very grateful to be in British Columbia for the services that they offer. However, it also means that if we choose to move to a different province that has less funding for autism, there's no national strategy for autism, which means that my husband and I basically choose between autism services or family back east. We can't have them both.
Have both.
So my son has a choice between getting to know his relatives continuously, where that would be access for us to get support and help, where we don't have babysitters, we don't have it's just my husband and I, or we could have autism therapy and autism services out in British Columbia. Now I know that's one of the things that we find frustrating, in the sense that I wish that there was a national strategy in Canada where each province would have the same type of availability when it comes to autism services. I don't know how either of you feel. I know that some of you, your family lives out of province, and others, you're more based here.
Yeah, we're just a small family, really. Yeah, my family lives here, but it consists of my mom.
Okay.
So, small family. Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a difference, and I notice in the autism community here in British Columbia a lot of talk about, is it better in Alberta, is it worse? And it's just different, I think, in terms of how their funding works, and there's pros and cons to each, and for me as well, access to different kinds of therapies is different across the province, and which ones are funded. So it's not just quantity of funding, but what they will fund.
Yes.
And so quite frankly, I just had to decide, like, where do we want to live for all the other reasons, and just put that on the back burner, because the grass always seems greener, or
Yes.
you never really know until you get there and you see what's available. You could move. Someone could move to British Columbia because it's got better funding, and then not find any good therapists that are a good fit, and they had a good fit team back where they were, right? So there's just so
Yes.
many unknowns that I think, the most important thing is that my husband and I are really, engaged in trying to get the best therapies, and I try to not worry about all the coulda shouldas on the other side. But I totally feel you with the lack of family, because we have no family here, and
Yes.
respite services, like, you have to be in real crisis, I think, before you can access those, and
Even
so
just
that makes
getting
it
a
tough.
babysitter. Like,
We don't have one.
We don't have one. Tina,
Well, I
you-
have one. Maybe I'll share it with you.
Oh no, I don't know if you'll
private.
regret that later or not.
I already said I already shared her with one other autism mom, and now every now and then there's a competitive Saturday
Oh,
situation going on. Yeah,
no.
that's okay. That's okay.
But anyhow, I just noticed we're running out of time once again, and time seems to just go
It
so fast with
flies.
you two.
Yeah,
flies.
well, we're chatterboxes.
Absolutely. But you want to know what? You give a lot of really great information, and I know our podcast
you.
audience is really thankful to the information that you're sending out in the airways. So once again, Kathy, once again, Tina, thank you so much for joining
Thank
me on this
you.
podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks. It was
Yeah, it's
fun
a big
again.
lovin'. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We also want to remind you to subscribe and join our mailing list on our webpage at autism30.com to receive information about upcoming podcasts and information. And if you're listening to us on iTunes, please take a moment to write us a review. Our goal is to help the autism community, and the more comments we have and are better ranked, that would really help us in our endeavors. We also appreciate all of you, our international listeners. And once again, this is Tally telling you to live in love.
Hey yo, I'm an autism awareness angel, making sure my wings protect